You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, take a break, or say goodbye to alcohol for good, this podcast will help you stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hi everyone, welcome back for another episode. I've got a very short one for you today about something that's been on my mind a lot lately. And it's a bit controversial, but this is what I believe, so here we go. Stop saying you have an addiction. And definitely stop calling yourself an addict. We could sit here and debate what addiction is and what's the difference between someone who drinks a lot and someone who has an addiction. We could try to define addiction. We could talk about how addiction is diagnosed because there aren't actually any real medical tests to diagnose addiction. There are screenings based on questions about your behavior. You are asked things like how often you drink, how often you have more than 6 drinks in a session, how often you feel regret after drinking, and so on. And based on your patterns of behavior, you might get diagnosed with addiction, but I want you to understand that this is a very fluid framework based on self-reporting and based on subjective interpretations of your behavior. It's not like a blood test that offers a definitive yes or no. Also, the threshold for what counts as addictive behavior is kind of arbitrary. In these assessments, there are a number of possible criteria that get evaluated. So we're talking things like cravings, loss of control around alcohol, the impact of drinking on your life, and so on. And if you have 2 or 3 of those symptoms, that's considered mild alcohol use disorder, to use one of the terms, which means that you don't have an addiction. But if you have 4 of those symptoms, suddenly that's moderate alcohol use disorder, which means that it gets labeled as addiction. But there might actually not be a meaningful change for most people between 2 symptoms and 4 symptoms. And the same behavior in one person might be labeled as no big deal, while in another it's labeled as addiction, all based on interpretation, context, and who is doing the assessment and issuing the verdict. Drinking exists on a spectrum, and your relationship with alcohol is defined by more than how much you drink or how often you drink or how severe your hangovers are. But labels like addiction and even alcohol use disorder imply a binary. Either you're fine or you're an addict, and that label comes with all kinds of stigmas attached to it, and a lot of shaming and self-blame, and this is how people end up believing that there is something fundamentally wrong with them. So this is what I want you to realize. Words like addict and addiction are just arbitrary labels. They're social constructs based on patterns, but they're not clearly defined or easy to measure. That's my first main point. But my second main point, which is the more important one, is that even if everyone could agree on a definition of addiction, and even if we could measure accurately and conclusively whether someone is addicted or not, these labels are still useless at best and profoundly harmful at worst. When you tell yourself you have an addiction, you're pathologizing yourself. You're making the problem bigger than it is and treating it like a disease. You're making your drinking habit take on this epic proportion and imply that it's beyond your control. I still remember a session I had with a client a couple of years ago where she was telling me that she had stopped eating meat like a decade ago and never missed it and never thought about it and never had FOMO, but she was struggling to go out and not drink in social situations. I asked her what she thought was different about alcohol compared to meat, and she said to me, "Well, it's my addiction." She said it like, duh, isn't it obvious? I wasn't addicted to bacon. But in that moment, I realized that she was using the term addiction as a little bit of an excuse. And I don't mean that to blame her and say she was doing something wrong. It's so understandable what she was doing because that's what we learn. That's what we hear about addiction. And if she labeled her drinking as an addiction, it gave her an explanation about why she was still drinking and struggling to make a change. In a way, it absolved her because in her mind, having an addiction meant that the issue was separate from her. And listen, I know that different people respond to dopamine differently. I know that meat and alcohol are not the same, and I know the brain doesn't react the same way. And I know that certain people are more predisposed to compulsive behaviors based on their genetics, epigenetics, history of trauma, neurodivergence, and many other factors. All of that is true, and I'm certainly not arguing that we all react to alcohol the same way, and therefore the solution for everyone who is trying to drink less or to quit drinking is the same for everybody. I am not saying that. But what I am saying is that the label addiction, if you're using that to describe your behavior, might be keeping you stuck because you end up telling yourself that it's harder to break an addiction than it is to break a habit. But that's not true. Drinking is a habit. Anything that we do repeatedly becomes a habit. No matter if you started that behavior at age 6 or 18 or 45, and no matter if it has a positive effect on your life or a negative one or a neutral one. Any behavior that you repeat becomes habituated. And over time, with more repetition, that habit becomes automated based on environmental cues. In the case of drinking, those cues can be things like 6 p.m. or calling your best friend after dinner to gossip, if that's what you do usually, or turning on the TV on Sunday afternoon if you're used to watching TV on Sunday afternoon while sipping a gin and tonic. These cues trigger the automated behavior, namely the drinking. But the good news is habits can be broken. Humans have innate neuroplasticity, which means that our brains are malleable and flexible, and we continue to adapt as we learn new things and as we make new choices and as we are exposed to new things and new information. We are not stuck doing the same thing forever. I want you to hear me when I say this. We can break old patterns and neural associations, and we can form new patterns. Whatever you have learned can be unlearned, and you can learn entirely new things too that you've never done before. Neuroplasticity is something that we're all born with. We all have this ability to adapt and evolve and change. It doesn't matter when you started drinking, and it doesn't matter how long you've been drinking. Of course, if you're physically dependent on alcohol and have severe withdrawal when you try to stop, you might need medically supervised detox before you quit drinking. So please consult your doctor if you have any concerns about withdrawals. But the bottom line is, you are more than capable of changing any habit you want to change. And that's exactly why I want you to think about your drinking as a habit. Because A, when you call it a habit, it takes the moral judgment out of the equation. There is not the same stigma attached to the word habit as there is to the word addiction. And B, calling something a habit makes it sound more manageable, and it reminds you that you're not powerless. You have agency. You have free will. You can choose not to drink. When you call your drinking a habit, you can see that it's not something happening to you, it's something that you're choosing to do. And this is good news because it reminds you that you can also choose not to drink. You can choose to stop that behavior. You can choose to build better habits. So this is my invitation for you. Actually, it's more than an invitation. It's my plea. I beg you, stop saying you have an addiction and stop calling yourself an addict. Even saying things like, I have an addictive personality, stop saying that too. First of all, because it's a vague label that doesn't really hold up to scientific scrutiny, but more importantly, because it's not helpful. And that's ultimately what I'm interested in when it comes to any belief or any story you tell yourself. How helpful is it to you? How do you feel when you say that you have an addiction? Is that story helping you to make the choices you want to make the changes you want to make? Is that story helping you to be who you want to be? I'm gonna guess not. What I would say is a lot more helpful is to remind yourself that drinking is a habit and you absolutely have the power to change that habit. And I can help you. And by the way, that client who used to say that she had an addiction, she's been completely sober now for over a year, and her husband has been on a months-long break from drinking as well. This is what she wrote to me recently. He loves the way he feels, and I love the energy that alcohol-free living brings to our home. The positive ripple effects just keep building. This is what she said to me in an email. And if alcohol-free living is a goal of yours too, and you want to see the positive energy that it brings to your home, book a free consultation with me, and let's see if we're a good fit to work together. Hypnosis is one of the best modalities for habit change, and I would love to help you break your dependence on alcohol and build the beautiful, sober life you want. The link to book your free chat with me is in the show notes. And honestly, you have nothing to lose. That one conversation could change your life. So go and book your call today, and I can't wait to talk to you. Take good care, my friends, and I'll talk to you next week. If you're looking for practical advice for how to say no to alcohol and say yes to yourself, you will want to get on my email list. Sign up to receive my free guide with 7 steps to kickstart your sobriety. The link is in the show notes, so go and grab it now, and I'll see you soon in your inbox.